those being the financial implications for you. Hi, and welcome everybody to our sing-along. We just covered an entire episode in musical format, so I'm sorry you missed it, but stay tuned, we'll be going over in lecture. Hopefully that'll be just as memorable, thought-provoking, charming, entertaining, and as fun as the sing-along was. So, welcome to episode 2. We're about to get started. Hi, you. Welcome back to the series. I'm sorry that you missed a sing-along, but I caught you on your phone all last class, so I am going to have to put you through this lecture series instead of the sing-along. So, I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a punishment here, so you'll just have to bear with me as we slowly and arduously go through all the fun and entertaining stuff that is this course. Yeah! Sorry. There was no sing-along. You can tell your friends. Don't tell your friends. Episode number 2, our financial growth episode. Yeah! This is going to be all about your current financial situation. Yeah, I had to take some things from episode 3 and plug them in here and, move some things around. So hopefully this will create a much better narrative, a much better storytelling experience for you. So the numbers that we'll be generating today are going to be much more visceral. Yes, the numbers we're going to be generating are going to be heart-wrenching, sweat-inducing, and tear-leaking. You'll taste the salt. So, let's get into the meat of things, or tofurkey if you swing that thing. If you swing that thing. Yeah. If you swing that way. That's what I meant to say. But wait, there's more to this intro. A shameless plug, yeah. Hi, I'm Christian. I'm a real estate agent in the Puget Sound area. And if you don't know where that is, you probably don't care that I'm a real estate agent in the Puget Sound area. I just hope you enjoy this content for educational purposes and entertainment purposes nonetheless. Okay, you can also email me, information down below. Love to talk. Okay, back to the episode. Air push-ups. I know, you're probably asking me, finances. Man, I just want to go look at houses. I don't even need you, really. I can just go to Zillow. Boom, look at that. Ooh, look at the houses. Don't even need you. Well, hold on to your horses, partner. We first need to make sure that you have enough money to go shopping with. And if you don't have enough money, you should at least have enough money right now that the lender will say, hey, I will give you the missing money. So, everything we're going to cover is super important. Again, super important. Look, I know that your finances are between you and your future lender, but your future lender is not going to let you know how to better your lot in life, especially retroactively. And that's where I come in. I think it's best to discuss this stuff early so it can have the maximum impact. And I'm the education you should have had 12 years ago. So give me a second here. I'm going to pat myself in the back. Oh, that feels good. I don't want you to make all these grand plans in your head and then go sit in front of a lender who's only going to laugh you out the door saying, you call this a down payment? You call this a good DTI? No, and especially worse is if you just go steady as she goes for the next couple of years and it turns out that you could have done so much more to improve yourself between now and, like, say, 2 years from now. That's all wasted potential. Just think. 2 years ago, if you had this information, where you would be right now. So think of that moving forward. I want you to sit in front of the lender and be all nice and gussied up, and I want them to say, where'd you learn all this information? Was it your parents? Was it the public education system? Or was it some fancy university? And you say, no, I learned it on YouTube for free from some idiot who makes bad jokes and can't talk English quite right all the time. That's what I want you to say, and I want you to knock their socks off. Yeah! Bah, 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 bah. Therefore, we'll be looking at how lenders decide between a qualified and unqualified applicant. And that's by looking at their DTI, debt to income ratio, and their credit score. In fact, it's pretty simple. It's so simple, we can do it from the comfort of your couch, or the porcelain throne if that's where you happen to be. So we'll be crunching some numbers, determining your DTI, and then once we have those numbers, we'll be figuring how much house you can afford. That's part 2 in this episode. So hang in there, try to use realistic numbers because I want you to be, honest with yourself. You can't really lie to yourself. You can lie to yourself, but try not to. So please be truthful with yourself. You can make a lot of headway. You can have an epiphany, and imagine all the sorts of great things that can come from this moment if you just just throw yourself into it. No fear. There's no person judging except for yourself. And, if you can accept your current situation and you can say, damn it, I'm going to do better, that's all I'm asking for. Okay, on to the fun stuff. I promise. Okay, your Dti ratio. Yeah. This is your debt to income ratio. And this is what it sounds like. It's essentially measuring how much debt you have to how much income you have. Well, okay, let's be a little bit more specific. Your income is your gross income. This is before any taxes or any deductions are taken out of your paycheck. And debt is any debt that is obligated for you to pay for more than 10 months. So if you have a debt that's expiring soon, or you can actually speed up a debt to be paid off sooner, that's one way that you can reduce your debt in the overall grand scheme of things. So take that into consideration when you're filling out later how many debts you're currently paying. Are they going to be expiring within 10 months or not? So just a little caveat there. Calculating your gross income is pretty simple if you're a W-2 or a salaried employee. All you have to do is look at your previous year's tax return on your 1040, line number, and there it is. That's your gross income. Now, if you're receiving any child support or alimony or any other source of income, make sure to include that. Okay, now that you have your gross yearly income, divide that by 12 and you get your monthly income. Simple, we're going to use that monthly income with our calculations going forward. If you're self-employed or you own your business, you're going to have to take your previous 2 years of tax returns, your 1040 Schedule C, line 7, add those two up from the previous 2, and then you divide by 24 because you're essentially having 2 years, right? So there you go, there's your monthly income. Here's a quick word of caution for my fellow self-employed people or people who are thinking about becoming self-employed. Be careful with the amount of business deductions you take. Yes, they sound great when it comes to tax time, but the lender doesn't always necessarily want to see you taking every deduction because you can make your income artificially too low. For example, if you have $100,000 in profit, but you show yourself as only making $10,000 a year or $833 a month, the lender's going to laugh at you and say, you can't pay off a mortgage, you're only making $833 a month. Get lost, loser. So just be careful. This is especially true 3 to 4 years prior to applying for a mortgage, because lenders don't just look at your last 2, they also look at any trends that might be apparent. So either they like to see stable or they like to see growing, and definitely not decreasing, and definitely not erratic, like you're paying yourself 10, 10, 10, 100,000. I mean, that looks kind of fishy to them. So be extra cautious just how much you're paying yourself 3 to 4 years prior, and don't take out too many business deductions if you want to show that you have at least a little bit of an income to pay for the mortgage they'll be giving you. Okay, on to everybody's favorite subject, how much debt they're paying. Yes, we're going to be calculating your monthly debt obligations. Okay. I know this will be a little bit too real for some folks, but it's good to look at what you're, essentially how much money you're hemorrhaging each month and try to get that under control, because going forward, you want to ratchet that down so you can actually, put that money back into your income. Okay, here we go. Here are the most common types of debts that are weighing everybody down. Number 1, their car loan. Number 2, their student loans. Number 3, let's do credit card debt, but we're going to do monthly minimum payment for debt. Okay, what else? We got personal loans, we got child support, we got divorce settlements, aka alimony, and then we have the rent that you're currently paying. And in the future, or going forward, when calculating your future DTI, the lender will substitute your rent for your future housing payments, your pity payments. So just take that in consideration. So when you go look for a house, you'll be able to take that number, your pity payment, essentially swapping out for your rent, and seeing what kind of debt or DTI ratio you'll be looking at going forward in the future. Okay, now we'll take a moment, go to that Google spreadsheet and just download a copy. It's nice and gussied up, just like you are going to be, and plug in those numbers, and we'll be looking at what kind of DTI you're looking at. I thought it best to do this one time together with some hypothetical numbers here, and the next time you will be doing this, you're going to be using your own numbers. So after this example, I want you to go through, pause the video, and plug in your own numbers. But for now, let's just do some hypotheticals, starting with our monthly gross income. For this example, I'm not going to go into adding a spouse or a secondary income. So if you have, you sell sweaty socks on the internet for $1,000 a month, you can enter that there. But we'll just be using a primary salary of $6,000 a month. For that example, you'll see that it sums up our combined salaries here. So if we had a spouse making $6,000, boom, there it is. Let's say $1,000. There you go. See how quickly and simple that is? Just summing up our incomes there. Okay, let's just stick to the $6,000. For rent, you can see that here rent is a separate line item because it's not really a debt, but when it gets swapped out for pity payments, it will become a debt. So it's more like a placeholder for the moment. All our other debts here are aggregated into this other debt category. So you can see car loans, student loans, and of course with any other, if you have any other debts that are not mentioned here, you can enter that here. But we can see that it gets broken down into two separate items here. So we can start with our rent of $1,600 that we're giving to landlord each month. And let's say we have a student loan payment of $300 a month, and also a credit card debt of $100 a month for minimum payments. Here we can see that it's been summed up. Here's a subtotal for our other debt and also for our housing expenses, or in this case, rent. And then we have a grand total debt down here of $2,000 because it's just summing up these two line items. Okay, at the bottom here we have our Dti calculator. This essentially just divides, click on this number, it divides debt by income, giving us a Dti ratio of 33.33%, or otherwise saying that 1/3 of our salary is immediately consumed by debt payments. So that's pretty much it. I want you now to go and plug in your own numbers, and then we will resume the video after you're done. Okay, that was pretty simple to calculate your Dti, right? The hard part is usually admitting that you have so much debt. Okay, a lot of Americans have a lot of debt. Most of the people you see are successful are because of debt. Yeah, they're successful because they borrow money. Let's not get into that, but I want you to look at your debt because you can't address it if you don't look at it. So it's important that you really be honest with yourself. This is the debt, and let's see if there's any ways that we can actually eliminate that debt. Can we pay off our credit cards early? No more debt. Can we maybe get a different car? No more debt, right? So there's different ways that we can think about these things. So what does this percentage mean? This percentage lets you and the lender know how much of your income is already spoken for. And by spoken for, I mean already spoken for long term. Remember, this is more than 10 months debt obligations. So just consider that. And we will get into different ways to reduce your debt obligations, but we'll save that for a different video. Right now, this video is focused on your current financial picture because it's the most important part about setting the stage to make sure going forward, you know exactly what you're facing now and how to improve your situation going forward. So let's just put a pin in it, we'll get to it. And now that I have you completely invested in this, I want you to bring in your spouse's debt and income. Yes, if you're married, take their debt, take their income, and smush both your numbers together and generate a new Dti. If you're not married or if you're single, use your individual numbers. Because when a lender looks at it, they look at a family unit's income. If you're not married or you're single, that means that's your family unit, is you. So, taking that consideration. Speaking about buying a house as an unmarried couple, here's Christian's unsolicited and callous relationship advice. Yeah, you can do like that. Okay, there we go. Rotating is difficult. Buying a house is notorious for causing rifts in a relationship. And it's not because of having to compromise on finishes or what paint or moving is such a pain or finding a house is so emotionally draining. Did we get it? Did we not get it? No, that's not because of it. The primary reasons why rifts in relationships or the number one cause of breakups is money or lack thereof because caused by debt. And as we said prior, house equals debt. And a house is usually the largest debt you'll ever have. So just taking that consideration. Therefore, if you're in an unmarried relationship and you can afford to buy a house, a townhouse or a condo, that's what I highly recommend. And why is that? Two reasons. The first of all is that the debt is only being carried by one of you, meaning that the other person also doesn't feel the pressure of the debt, meaning it doesn't act as a wedge into the relationship. It's only just for the one person. And if they're allowed by the lender to get the mortgage, they can afford it. Great. The second reason why you should buy a home by yourself is because you get to avoid what makes divorce so ugly. I mean, besides the kids, is the fact that properties need to get split up. And you're the only one on the title, and you split up, you keep the house, there's no ugly divorce settlement, there's no lawyers, nothing involved, you just go your separate ways, and there's nothing that needs to be done. Okay, easy, right? Okay, enough of the callous stuff, let's get into the... What's the opposite of a callous? Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get back to your numbers. Now that we've determined this funny little number, how exactly can we use it? What does 33% mean in the grand scheme of things? Okay, it means that, yeah, you're paying 33% of your income is going to debt. Yeah, okay, got it. But what is it, how does it get used? Well, that's where the magical numbers of 28, 36, and 43% come in. Your future housing expenses should not exceed 28% of your gross monthly income, or 31% if you're using an FHA loan. If you're wondering how housing expenses are different than your mortgage expenses, it's because mortgage expenses are part of your housing expenses. In addition to your mortgage, you also have property taxes and insurances. And if you're moving into a place with an HOA due, you got to include that as well. And that's why these are called pity payments and not just your mortgage. So it stands for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. This rule allows us to work with our known, which is in this case $6,000 of gross monthly income, and multiply it by 28% to determine how much we can afford for a house in the future. So in this case, $6,000 times 28% equals $1,680. Now if you're using an FHA loan, you can substitute 28 for 31%. All right, on to the 36% rule. This is also known as total debt, or the back-end ratio. It is your total allowable debt. If taking out a mortgage would cause you to spend more than 36% of your gross income on debt, chances are the lender will not give you the full amount that you're looking for. This 36% rule is essentially what you calculated in the beginning of this video, except in the case of current rent, you're going to be using your future pity payments. 36% rule works a lot like the 28% rule. All we have to do is multiply our gross monthly income, in this case, let's say $6,000, multiply that by 36%, and we're left with $2,160 to spend on debt. Again, I am not a lender. I am a real estate agent, and so the things that we'll be covering are just generalities. So just be aware of that. With this Dti calculator, we'll cover the two most common loan types. Let's go through the spreadsheet together using our hypothetical for these two loan scenarios. If you're planning on using a VA or a USDA loan, the lender will still use your DTI, but because there are more restrictions on these loan types, it's best to first get an understanding how the conventional and the FHA loans work. Don't worry too much at this point about the difference between the two. We'll go through the specifics in our mortgage episode. All you need to know at this point is that conventional loans are stricter in their lending requirements and have lower DTI caps. This translates to conventional loans being cheaper than FHA loans in the long run. FHA loans, on the other hand, are generally cheaper in the short term and are easier to qualify for. They have lower credit requirements and higher DTI caps. Both have loan limits, but due to the less stringent nature of the FHA requirements, you are able to borrow less. In case you're wondering what those loan limits are, they're determined by county basis. I'll show you where you can find out your loan limit for your county in the mortgage episode. Using your DTI and comparing it to either loan's benchmark should give you a pretty good idea in which loan camp you'll find yourself. We'll begin with the conventional loans. The 28% front-end ratio and the 36% back-end ratio I mentioned earlier are benchmarks that apply to conventional loans specifically, whereas 31% front-end ratio and 43% back-end ratio apply to FHA loans. However, I did want to preface that these are lower-end benchmarks and have become somewhat outdated since the housing prices have really outpaced income. Lenders have been accepting higher DTIs for a while now, so I've included both the old and the new maximum DTIs for both conventional and FHA loans. And you'll see what those are here in a second. All right, with that said, let's get into the example. Okay, now that we have our DTI calculated right here, we can go to the conventional benchmark sheet. Down here, just click on the next tab over, and you'll see that 33% carried over to right here. This is your current DTI in pie chart format, sandwiched between the old 36% rule and the newer 43% rule. Again, these are simply calculated based upon your income right here, and then multiplied by the respective percentage, in this case 36 and 43, to give you your maximum pity payment and other debt you can carry based on your income. In this case, $21.60 for the 36% rule and $25.80 on the 43% rule. However, our current debt and rent are less than the 36% rule, giving us check marks across the board stating such. Here it says your current debt is below the 36% rule, and here it says your current debt is below the 43% rule. Yay! Okay, now let's scroll down. Down here we see the front end ratio. This is your housing expense. This is in this case, for conventional mortgages, this is the 28% rule, which is exactly the same thing of multiplying 28% by your income to determine your maximum pity payments. This, however, like the 36% rule, has kind of fallen by the wayside. Far more important these days is just your maximum DTI and less of your front end ratio. But it's still important for calculating how much leftover debt you can have. All right, now we can go see our rent here, and this is really just a pie chart of your current expense. It doesn't really tell you information besides that your rent is looking great, and now look at your debt. Here you can see that our current other debts of $400, these are everything but rent, right here, $400, looks pretty good when compared to the limits set in part by the 36 and the 43% rule. Here the limits are $480 and $900 respectively. When we subtract how much is left over, we see that we're $80 shy of the 36% rule and generously $500 short of the 43% rule, meaning we have lots of buffer room to actually, if we wanted to take out more mortgage, we could. And this gives us a nice job, and chances are we can apply for conventional mortgage. Okay. However, I don't think a lot of people will be seeing something like this. I think, like most Americans, you might actually have a chance of having a really high rent. For example, if you're paying right now $3,000, and let's say this was your other debt you were currently carrying, so this hasn't changed, what will happen to our DTIs? As you can see, our DTI shot up dramatically to 56.67%. Now it tells us your current debt is above the 36% rule, above the 36%, and above the 43% rule. Oh no, that means I can't qualify for a loan, right? Well, that's only part of the picture. That's why I included this stuff down here, which tells you, oh my goodness, look at your rent. It's half of your income. And you'll have a little warning sign that says, your rent is high and distorting your DTI. You know, really, nothing here has changed. This is all the same dollar figures that we had previously, because you still had your $400 current debt. And why is that? Well, that's because, remember, your rent will be replaced by your future pity payments. So this will essentially be stricken from your future DTI. However, what we're currently calculating is your current DTI. Remember, we're just trying to get a picture of where you currently sit, because how do you know where you can go if you don't know where you currently are? So this is why it's so important to look at your current financial picture. While yes, it means you can still qualify for a mortgage, I still would caution you from having such a high rent payment, because you can actually go somewhere cheaper and commute more and actually pay off these debts. And why is paying off these debts so important? I mean, you can still apply for a mortgage, right? Well, let me show you something. If we take our current debt load, and currently $50 more per month of mortgage can actually net you an extra $10,000 worth of purchasing power. So the price tag of the house you can buy goes up by $10,000. Well, that doesn't seem like much. What does it mean for $400? So let's divide that by 50 and then multiply by that $10,000 that I said earlier. By paying off these two debts down to zero, you were able to afford $80,000 more of house. So instead of looking for a $300,000 house, you can actually afford now a $380,000 house. And that is a substantial difference in the amount of house you can buy. And that's just for $400. I mean, if you had a car loan of $500 or a personal loan of $500, that's an extra $100,000 worth of house you can qualify for if you didn't carry that debt. Okay, enough of that for now. Let's go and say you're one of those millennials who's currently living at home, saving a bunch of money on not paying any rent. However, you decided to splurge on a new car and you have, let's say, a $400 personal loan, and you go back and you look at your DTI. Well, look at that. We're well below the benchmark, 10% almost, and of course way below the 43%. And we get check marks across the board. Well, okay, what else do we see? Okay, all right, yeah, we know that we're not paying any rent. However, let's go over and say, is debt weighing you down? And here we can say that yes, it is definitely weighing you down. Here we see in visual format just how much debt you have compared to how much you're allowed to have by the 43 and the 36% rule. With a more generous 43%, you're paying an extra $700 over what is allowed. And that's why we get these two eeks and try an FHA. While I would first advise you to pay off as much debt as you can, sometimes things like child support or alimony are just not going to go away. And well, you'll probably have to settle for an FHA loan. So let's just try this FHA. What would happen if we now click on this, let's reposition ourselves, and we click on FHA. Look at that. Our 43% rule is over here now, and there's now a brand new 50% maximum. Again, because the FHA has looser lending requirements, you can take on a lot more debt, even though your income hasn't changed. As you can see here, you can take 50% of debt on your untaxed, undeducted income, meaning you can have a total PITI plus maximum other debts of $3,000. Additionally, you have now a 31% rule instead of the 28% rule, meaning you can now automatically take out more for your house. However, do be aware that, of course, FHA loans do have a lower lending limit than conventional. So this is not quite the whole picture. Okay, and let's go over to the debt. Let's see how it stacks up to the more generous 50% rule. As you can see, our current debt is still exceeding our 50% rule, which means shape up soldier, you're going to have to pay some debt. You will not qualify for a mortgage. What you're going to need to do is to go back and see what you can pay off. You know what? Sell that car, get a used Camry, try to buy it cash so you don't have any more debts, and try to get that down to zero. Let's see what will happen then. Well, look at that. Nice job. We can now qualify for an FHA loan just because we don't have that fancy car. We're just a smidge over the 43% rule, in fact. So, that looks quite good. And let's go back to our conventional benchmark and see what's happened. We will still have $800 worth of debt, but now we're below the $900 imposed by the 43%. And if you're wondering why this is $720 here and $900 here, it's because it uses this PITI payments. Remember, this is 28% and this is 31%, which causes some numbers to change. But here in this case, we can actually qualify for a conventional loan. There you go. That's how to use this calculator to see where you currently are in your financial situation. Again, this doesn't really inform the lender of anything. It's just there for you to understand your financial picture. And in part 2, we're going to be using your future DTI, what a lender would use. So again, this is current situation. This is taking a look at your current debts and seeing if you can pay them off, because when you start looking into your future, how much house you can afford, it'll help to have less debt because you can afford more house. And with that said, we can, it's right here actually. If you haven't already, find your credit score, and we'll be doing that in part 2 anyway. And then in part 2, we'll be using the NerdWallet How Much House I Can Afford calculator. And that will use your future DTI to see how much house you can calculate. So it'll be using your other debts that you currently have, this one, and then plugging it into your income and your PITI payments to see if you can afford a house in the area that you live. Okay, with that said, we're going to get to the video. We're going to do the outro to part 1 here, and then after that, we'll continue to part 2. Fear not. The numbers that we just discussed are not fixed in stone. Lenders actually have a lot of wiggle room, and when they come to personally deciding in what kind of financial situation you are. For a conventional loan, you can go up as high as 45 or even 50%. But be wary, it's not because the lender is so generous. it's because there's other compensating factors, such as you having no debt, meaning no car loans, no credit card payments, no student loans, or you have a very padded emergency fund. So if you have 6 months, that lender's gonna love it and they say, oh, we can give you more because even if something happens, we know you'll pay us back. A word of caution here, yes, it's possible to get a mortgage with a higher DTI, but these will no longer be qualified mortgages, which means the terms or the interest rates on them are gonna be predatory. And we don't want a predatory mortgage. You're gonna be one of those people who crashes the economy. So try to stick with a qualified one. By knowing how much debt you're able to have, this should be highly motivating because it's a goal. You see that number right in front of you saying, be me. So take all your debts and kind of think about how we can squeeze your current debts to be the exact same shape as that number you see sitting in front of you. Congratulations, you hopefully found out something about yourself and your financial situation, and now I promise you we're gonna get up into the fun stuff, and that's seeing how much house you can afford in your current situation. But in order to do so, there's one last step, and I'm not really gonna guide you through it. It's pretty self-explanatory and simple. But I'm gonna ask you to go to annualcreditreport.com if you don't already have your credit score. So go to that website. It's the one that's recommended by the government, so I have full faith in it. Anyway, follow the prompts. You only need to do one credit report, so you don't need to go through all three. Just the ones that will suffice for this exercise. And once you have that sweet, sweet score, we can carry on with this video. So hit the pause button, boom, and come back when you're done. Hey, and welcome back, everybody. I trust you made it through the DTI calculations and you found out your credit score, and that's why you've come this far, and now you're going to get into the real fun bit of learning how much house you can currently afford on your current budget and your current income and debt. So let's get to it. First, you're going to plug in the town that you'd like to live in, and while I think this is only going to impact the price depending on which state you select, you should at least know which town you like to move to. I mean, do some research right now, look at the climate, look at the population size, what are the amenities, look at the important stuff right now that you would actually like to live in that city. After you found out that you like to live in that city, plug it in here, and then you can generate how much house you can afford. Of course, we need to plug in our DTI that we were working so hard to calculate, so we're just going to scroll past this stuff right down to income and debts. And if you don't see that, it might be that the loan details is popped open. So first, scroll down, click on income and debts, and here we go. You will now populate this with your annual household income. So we've been using your monthly gross income before, but now multiply your monthly gross income by 12, and you'll get your household income. We'll be entering $80,000. You enter whatever number you have. Here we'll be entering your minimum monthly debt. This is not annual debt, this is monthly debt. And a big thing you have to avoid is entering your rent. Just take everything and then subtract your current rent, because it'll be, as I said earlier, when we're calculating how much house you can afford, it's going to be using your future pity payments to calculate how much debt you can carry. So get away with your rent and just use everything else. So in this case, we have student loans and credit card payments, for example. So we're going to be entering $600. You enter whatever monthly debt you have in front of you in your spreadsheet, and then you push enter. The last thing we'll do before we look at how much house we can afford is you'll pick which credit card score you received. In this case, we're going to go with good, but you can quickly cycle through them and see how your credit score impacts the likely rate you'll receive, as well as how much house you can afford. And you can quickly see, oh, what if I got from good to excellent? What would that mean for me? Okay, you can play with that later, but first select the one you got, and for example, I'm going to go with good. Okay, here we see that in Seattle, with my current DTI and credit score, I would be able to afford $407,000. This is, of course, for a monthly payment of $1,800 at a 36% DTI. Remember our 36% rule? Well, here it is in slider action. We can actually slide this all the way up to 43,
reflecting the 43% rule we also talked about. But right now, for instruction purposes, let's go back to our 36%, and we'll be going from there. Here we see our total monthly payment. This is not your mortgage payment. This is your mortgage payment. As you can see, it's only a portion of your total monthly payment. And that's because your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance make up the missing money here between your monthly payment and your mortgage payment. Your mortgage payment, again, is your principal and interest, which is the PI from your PITI payments. The TI is your taxes and insurance. So here you see this is your monthly PITI payment. So we have mortgage, taxes, and if you have an HOA because you're moving into a condo or you're moving into subdivision that has an HOA due, you can put that in here and put in $15 if that's what is applicable to the house you're looking at. For now, we're going to go with 0 because it makes it easier for all of us. Homeowner's insurance is automatically generated. It does not reflect how much house you're being. It's just a placeholder. So you'll have to talk to your insurance provider actually of how much homeowner's insurance you'll be looking at. Obviously, the more expensive your home is, the more insurance it will be. Property taxes also have the same rule. The more expensive your house is, the more taxes you'll pay. In Washington, it's 1% per year of how much your house is assessed at. And here we can see that it's 407 divided by 12 will roughly give us this number. Okay, now we have that. We can look, okay, so if I give the lender $1,800, they'll spread it out between these 3 areas. Okay, great. Okay, what does it mean to actually buy this house? Well, in order to buy this house, you're going to have to bring $91,000 to the closing table here in cash. And that might seem like a lot, and it is, because it is 20% of the value of this house. So a lot of first-time homeowners struggle finding this much money because they don't have a house that they have sold and built equity in already. So don't feel bad that you can't put 20% down. This is a lot of money. And because this is your first home, you don't have a previous home to tap into. Because you're going to be using less than 20% most likely, we'll be plugging that in here. But for just explanation purposes, your down payment is the money you'll be bringing because that's how much the lender wants you to pay for the house, and your total closing costs is what's going to cost to actually close on the house. This is money that'll go to escrow and you'll never see again. It doesn't add any value, it's just the cost. It's like, pretend it's like sales tax or something. It'll just, it's not the value of the item, it's just how much it costs to buy it. So here it says between 2 and 5%. Again, this is just an average. It does not reflect the accurate or the total true number. This is just an estimate. So just take that into consideration. Your closing costs can be paid for as a seller credit if we were in a buyer's market. However, asking for the seller to pay for in this current market, they're going to laugh you out of the room. So don't even bother. You can ask the lender to increase the rate on your loan, but that of course makes it more expensive. But if you cannot scrape together 10 grand to pay for closing costs, you can pay it off over 30 years, or you can just try to save 10 grand and pay everything up front and not have to worry about that. So our down payment now is the biggest issue. And of course, if we don't have 20%, we can here go over to loan details and put in what we currently have saved up. So currently, we'll put in $1. $1 will generate for us the minimum down payment for the house. Now I want you to put in how much you've currently saved up. And if you haven't currently saved up for this minimum down payment, use this current minimum down payment as your new goal of how much money you have to save. So we'll be using the minimum here. And again, if you've saved up more than the minimum, please go ahead and enter that number. What else is in the loan details? Well, here you're going to select a 30-year loan because if you do select a 15, you're going to be paying much more per month because they're squeezing in the price of the home in a shorter time, and because you're going to be paying off as little as possible per month because the payments are going to be high, select 30. Here select if you're a veteran. You can select yes if you are, and if this is your first VA loan, select yes, and you can put a 0 down payment in. You also have to be aware of the closing costs. I'm not quite sure if VA loans accept you can roll closing costs into the loan, so talk to your loan officer about that. Otherwise, you'd have to negotiate with the seller if you do not have the closing costs available to you when you do finally purchase the house. So yeah, you might be getting a 0% down as a veteran, but it does not mean you don't have to bring any money to the closing. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go back to a conventional loan, which is going to be, let's just do $9,000 because it's easy math. There we go. All right, let's go back to our monthly payment. Let's see what's happened. Well, here we see that our monthly payment is actually pretty much the same. Well, that's odd. Well, why did it change? Let's see. Oh, hey, what's this? Private mortgage insurance, $257, and that's like property taxes. My goodness. And that's because you're paying less than 20% down. And this is going to be a bitter pill to swallow, but it's going to be something you're going to have to do because housing prices are going through the roof and wages have not been keeping up. So most, as I said earlier, most first-time homebuyers are putting it down only 6%. So this is just a temporary, so we'll just call it a temporary fee that you're going to have to pay until you get 20% equity. Once you get 20% equity, this fee or insurance is then waived, and you'll only be paying mortgage payment, property taxes, HOA, and insurance after you get into 20% equity range. Okay. Okay, with that said, let's see. Our mortgage payment went down. That's weird. What does that mean for the house we can afford? Oh. Uh-oh. Well, that's less than I wanted. I thought we were like over $400,000 before. And just by putting less money down and this mortgage insurance, we're now cutting ourselves quite substantially from the house that we thought we could buy. Okay, so how do we fix this? If we only have this much money, if our current debt and income are as they are, well, okay, I can afford more than $1,800 a month. I will eat ramen for the next year, so I'm going to increase my monthly payment to 43% DTI, and here you can see that you're moving 2% from your expenses and savings column into your housing column. By doing that, you have now increased the amount of house you can buy. As you can see, now you're at $377. And this might be the only thing that you can do in your current situation. However, there's other things you can do. Now I want you to really think about what are some short-term or near-term goals you can set for yourself to increase this value, because honestly, the number you're looking at is probably pretty small. Unless you're making a good salary or you're married and you're both having a good salary, then you might be looking at a higher number. But if this is like most people, you have a middle class income, you have some debt, you have to pay student loans, you have a good credit score, not quite excellent, you've sometimes spent more money than you should have. Okay, so how do we actually get into a house? I mean, if I went to Zillow right now and I typed in Seattle, and then I said, okay, we're gonna, let's see, I'm gonna get rid of all our previous filters, and then we're gonna go to, let's do 370, and get rid of any weird things that are like burnt down houses. And we're gonna only want to focus on single family. What? Boat houses and boat slips. Well, as you can see, there's absolutely nothing in that price range that you can buy for a single family house. And that means you can only have several options to you. You can either increase the amount of house you can buy, which means reducing debt, increasing income, or moving to a different place. In our case, for example, if you want to still be close to Seattle, then you can move to a different county and take the ferry. Here you can see there's a lot more houses available in your price range than there were before. Sure, they're not going to always be the nicest house, but they are a starter home. So don't kick yourself if you have to buy a starter home. A starter home is a respectable way for you to build equity, and then you'll finally be able to increase your down payment if that's what you truly want. However, in this case, I want you to use this opportunity to set yourself some short-term goals. This is the financial growth section that we can really now see how quickly you can impact how much house you can buy. if you set yourself a goal from going from good to excellent credit score in the next couple months, you can see you can actually get a lot more house. Here we go. You're now back to 400,000 by increasing your credit score. What else can you do? Well, we can also start paying off your debts. And I want you to really think about which debts you could actually pay off that are burdening you. So if you were able to pay off your credit card debts, maybe you're paying, $200 a month. Let's say we can drop our monthly debt now to $400 because we paid off our credit cards. We didn't even ask for a raise at work, and we're still putting down, let's say, $20,000. Well, we did $9,000 in the beginning, but it's okay. Here you go. By dropping your debt, you can now afford much more house. And that goes for if you beg your parents for money. Let's say you can ask them for $20,000 to help pay for closing costs. Let's see what happens if they agree to give you an extra 20 grand. So you go from 20 to 40, and there you go, 461. All of a sudden, with your short-term goals, you can actually substantially increase the amount of house you can buy by committing to reducing your spending habits, asking for some assistance from your family, and also lowering the amount of debt, and of course, increasing your income. Increasing your income is a great way to afford more house, but it's also something you probably don't control. But there are ways that you can convince your work to give you a pay raise, and we'll go over that in the next video. But here, just by an extra pittance at work, we can now see that we can actually afford a decent house, and maybe not in Seattle, but maybe it's fixer-upper in Seattle. But again, it's a starter home. The competition will be high, so just hang in there. And see, we got a little bit more to choose from. Oh, not that one. But here, there's a house here right under Boeing or SeaTac, so you can have all the airplanes fly overhead. But if you're willing to live with that, there's at least inventory now available for you. So there you go. That's our lesson for today. I hope it didn't crush your dreams, the numbers you see in front of you. It should be serving as inspiration that you can achieve so much more. And in a few years' time, you can really start creating wealth. And we'll be going over those things later. But I wanted to create this video as a basis for your current financial picture right now. And I want you to say, I really want you to embrace it and say, you know what, I'm going to up my credit score from average to good, or I'm going to up it from good to excellent, or I'm going to pay off those dumb debts that have been hanging with me. I just been lazy, and it's been easier just to write that money off minimum. By taking some initiative here, or asking for an extra $5,000 work, just how much that can impact your life. So because it's kind of arbitrary, if we don't go over it right now, I think you will be able to much more understand how much more beneficial it is by looking at this calculator in the grand scheme of things. So I hope this helped you, and now for a quick outro, which will introduce our next episode and why this episode was so important. So hang in there, we're almost done, and I hope you had a good time and you were able to learn something from this episode.
Sorry if I crushed your dreams. It was necessary. It's really for the best. And while yes, there's a couple options that you have. You can lower your expectations, which means reduce the amount of house you're getting or the quality of the house you're getting. 2, you can move to a different state or a different part of the state, depending on your budget. And 3, you can really work on your budget. And that's what I am proposing to do. Realistically, you'll probably have to take a little bit of column A, and column C is lowering your expectations plus working on your budget. And that's why the next episode is completely focused on your budget. Yeah, you probably guessed it from all the stuff I've been saying before, but this is the stuff I love because this is what will make you into a better person. In the next episode, we'll really hone in on the whole budget thing. We'll dive deep into really the mindset of, let's say, an investor, because their mindset is completely different than your regular consumer that just goes and says, I have money, let's spend it. No, an investor says, I have money. How can I make that money into more money? And if we adopt that mindset, you're not going to have a mortgage for very long, or you will choose to have mortgages for very long because somebody else is paying them for you. So, okay, on to the fun bit now. We're still in the present tense. Don't get caught up in the future now. I am a little bit. I'm getting excited here. Just in case you haven't been wondering, why 36%? What does that have to do with anything? Why not 35 or 40%? I mean, it's kind of an arbitrary number, 36%. Why is that the benchmark? Well, it just so happened lenders calculated that number that you can still pay their mortgage, and you can still contribute to your savings and maintain your lifestyle and your discretionary spending, let's call it. Meaning that you can still pay for traveling, entertainment, food, clothing, all that good stuff that keeps you at a lower middle class lifestyle for the rest of your life. If you're planning on applying for a mortgage with a higher DTI, it means you're going to have to contribute a lot more from your gross income towards your housing expenses. That means you'll either have to dip into your savings, which you probably don't have, or two is really have to cut down your discretionary spending, meaning you have to give up all your hedonistic pleasures. That's all right. Trust me. Building your net worth is far better than buying some new dumb pair of shoes every month. Trust me. And paying everybody else. That's why I call this the financial growth episode, because it's only up from here on out. Yes. See you in the next episode. Our next episode is all about personal finance, budgeting, and